Forge the Narrative.
Hey everybody, welcome to Forge the Narrative. My name is Paul Murphy, your host. We are the Bella Lost Halls podcast. I'm joined tonight by Chris Morgan and Justin Pizza Ferrazza.
How you doing?
Hey, how y'all doing?
What's going on, guys?
Just another
great. Yeah, well, that's funny because it's actually raining over here in the desert.
Crazy weather going on. Justin, people may have watched our video battle report that we put up recently.
Yeah, I was able to drive down there and get a game in with you. It was a lot of fun. I hope people actually do check it out and enjoy it. Tell us what we did wrong.
Watching all the mistakes, almost
all
in slow-mo.
It's how we learn, though, so it'll help us get better, so I hope people check it out.
YouTube videos are like the real crucible of knowing your rules, right? Because there's nothing like a video on the internet for people to come and tell you how you're wrong.
Oh, well, that's some of that is probably good, right? But there was a situation that came up where someone died from perils of the warp.
First time ever. And
you're supposed to blow them up. And for me, I'm thinking that it's just on the 12s, whatever. You know, I have this whole series of how it works in my head because it's never happened to any of my psychers before in any, like they haven't died from perils of the warp. But that would have been an impact in our game. I don't know if you remember how it ended, but we've got, Mephiston limping around with one wound.
Coming at my Colossus assassin.
With one wound. I mean, it's a pretty tense game, I guess. Or I shouldn't say tense, fun, enjoyable, down to the wire type game. It was fun to do.
Yeah, the points were actually a lot closer than the model count would let you believe. And having that actually could have made a difference, a little bit of a swing. But to be honest, just like you said, I've never actually lost a psyker killing himself in this edition. So it's never come up before and just kind of blew right by it. I just assumed he died.
Well, now you know forever.
I won't forget next time. Hopefully I don't kill my own Grandmaster next time.
Well, yeah, right. I appreciate, giving me Slay the Warlord or something. I appreciate everyone coming with us on this journey as we get better with the filming. And there's a lot going on. It's holding the camera, rolling the dice. It's fun. It's worth doing it, especially when people watch it and to comment the way they do. People seem to enjoy checking it out. And when anyone's given us some criticism, it's all been done constructively, and that's so encouraging to hear. And it's worth doing.
Oh, absolutely. And then really the criticism has been very constructive. There hasn't been a lot of horrible internet hate, which is one of those things when you put something up at YouTube, you're kind of afraid you're going to get just thrown in your face. It's actually been helping us get a lot better at it. So we definitely appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, this episode is going to be about Assault. Been doing a lot of thinking about...
Not a pepper.
Been doing a lot of thinking about the way with the fly change and the Assault and how that's something that's going to have to adjust the game, but I still want to be tearing people's heads off as soon as possible. And so it got me thinking about the different hardcore Assault type units and and ways people can still use them in their army and get around gun lines and when it's best to do it. And then that's which units are actually the best at doing it, and how if that's something you want to do, how to get them in your army the best way possible, and then justify the points. Like if you are going to try to do that, how do you actually make it worth it and not just a bullet sponge for your opponent?
I think the disadvantage that melee units have always had is, if you have a ranged unit, they can deliver their damage without having to get close to danger, and with a melee unit, you have to be able to deliver after sustaining damage or find some way of avoiding it so that you can get there. And yeah, it's great when you can deliver a hard punch, but the cost-benefit ratio can be really skewed with some of these units that are supposed to be these great masters and deliverers of punishment.
So we're going to look at three major units and things that and why they're good. And if you're taking these units, you're probably going to be taking some of this other stuff. And we're going to do some objective comparison to Death Company, Bloodletters, and Berserkers.
Seems reasonable.
Well, this came up in our game. I was able to use the Forlorn Fury stratagem on Death Company, slingshot them all the way across the table, even in a hammer and anvil deployment. Get over there and chew up 2 or 3 smaller units. Get in the backfield and be really disruptive. Now, that's not a pat on the back or a brag or whatever. That's saying what these Death Company are good at. They're good at being disruptive. And if you do, as people move towards using screens, smaller units, cheap units, that are just there to kind of sit and grab objectives, how do you really chew them up? Well, things with bazillions of attacks and have enough offense to take 2 or 3 units off the board. That's also contributed to the ITC kill one, kill more concept. So you're like, these things can still score you major objective points and prevent your opponent from scoring as they move forward. And so I thought, man, this seems like a pretty good conversation.
And it definitely came up. There was a lot of use in that unit, the mobility, the killing power, and just it forced me to react to it. And that by itself sometimes is what you just need to do. You're just forcing your opponent to limit their options.
This is one of those things where Hammer and Anvil actually helped me because you had less space to spread your units out.
Absolutely.
So with a high model count unit, i.e. 15 dudes with jump packs, and this special stratagem that let them move twice, I was able to get pretty deep into your backfield and take advantage of the smaller. You didn't have 6 feet of deployment; you had 4 feet of deployment.
Can we just explain what Forlorn Fury does, just for people who may not know?
Yeah, go for it, Chris.
So Forlorn Fury is a stratagem that you can use before it's when the game starts, but before any of the turns have been made. After you roll to seize the initiative, the Blood Angel player with the unit of Death Company can spend 2 command points on Forlorn Fury that allows the unit of Death Company to move and advance before the game begins.
That's very important.
Roll an advance
before
roll
the game begins because you're getting that advance off. It doesn't count as your first turn movement, so the advance does not hinder you from doing anything else.
And that distance matters.
So on average, you're getting like a free 15 inches of movement if you've got jump packs on them, which you should.
And that's going to be something to compare. We're going to talk about too. Is the extra move really even necessary on all these types of units? For Death Company, absolutely, but maybe not demons and maybe not berserkers that you could get this 9-inch move on. I know you can't put jump packs on berserkers, but
you have rhinos and Alpha Legion stratagems and other ways to gain that mobility as well.
I just didn't. I wanted to pause that. I wanted to get that people's mind. Does he think you can put jump packs on berserkers? No.
Thanks, Internet. We got you this time. One step ahead of y'all.
So with the change to the fly, and I'm using the term change loosely, the clarification or errata on fly, the movement phase is even more critical. So getting this double move with these guys was way better than waiting until turn 2 to bring them in. Even though you allow your opponent to spread out and expose themselves in certain situations. You've got to read the situation. I was playing against another elite Marine builds are pretty much elite style compared to the model count of other armies. And so I did want to try to get over there and do a lot of damage as soon as possible. And you can't do that by holding things off the table anymore. So they had to start on the table.
Which makes first turn very critical.
Right. Got a little lucky with the first turn, able to do that. But why were they good? The Death Company, now how many points? Spec out a really ideal Death Company and let us know the points.
Well, 15 Death Company is the maximum you can get in a single unit. And what you're going to want to do is you want to put bolters in one hand, and you're going to want to have chainswords in the other. And then for 2 or 3, I would say 3. If you're doing 10 Death Company, maybe 2, depends on how many points you want to spend. You want to put something like Thunderhammers on because you want the extra attacks from them charging, because Death Company, part of their rule is they get +1 attack on the charge, which used to be a lot more common back in 7th edition and previous, but now you don't get the extra attack on the charge normally. So you're getting 3 attacks per Thunderhammer, and so you're trying to use those attacks against something big like, say, a Knight or a Demon Prince.
The Blood Angel special ability allows them to get the +1 to wound on the turn that they charge or are charged, and so you're even more likely to put some damage on those types of things. And the Thunderhammers are ideal. I had Power Fist on mine because that's how they're modeled, but the Thunderhammers are a little bit more ideal. You have the same neg to hit, but you're doing a flat 3 damage.
Yeah, the flat 3 damage is pretty critical. And then the chainswords, of course, give you an additional attack on the Marines. So having the bolt pistol in there isn't really super efficient because, generally speaking, you're not going to have an opportunity to shoot the pistol. Whatever you're attacking with the chainswords is going to be something like the Loyal 32, the guard screen, or Eldar Guardians, or insert something with a 5+ or worse armor save here. Like those are the targets for those specific attacks.
So how many points was that?
That's 348 points for 15 Marines, 3 with Thunderhammers, all with jump packs, which I think is absolutely critical to use this unit correctly. And you don't want to put them in rhinos or anything like that, because again, with Forlorn Fury, you only get to choose one unit that can do it, and you can't do it if they're not on the table, like in a rhino or if they're in reserve. So having jump packs on these guys, I think, is pretty critical. So that puts them at 17 points per model, except for the Thunderhammer version, which are 33 points per model.
And the Forlorn Fury, the fatter the squad, basically the more value you're getting out of that stratagem.
Yep, that's 2 command points, and when you're and not everybody's playing pure Blood Angels, but I usually do, so I think of it through that lens. When you're spending 2 command points, you want to have kind of like the confidence that you're going to get your value out of that.
It survived the great command point increase of 2018. So it started as 2, it's still 2. Okay, so moving them across. So that's Exhibit A. Is the Death Company for the 340, would you say 48 points?
Yeah, 348 points, or 27 power level for all you power level lovers.
How many attacks is that on the charge? This is the Death Company get +1 attack on the unit they are on the turn they charge or are charged. Chainswords gives them another attack. So the guys with chainswords are swinging 4 attacks apiece. The guys with
so that's
3 attacks apiece.
That's 48 attacks with the chainswords, and that's 9 attacks with the thunderhammers.
Chainswords, they're strength 4, but they effectively wound things on 1 better for the turns you're using them. So that's going to be how many attacks again?
So 48 chainsword attacks. So 12 dudes, 4 attacks, 48 chainsword attacks.
48 chainsword attacks, and then 9 thunderhammer attacks.
Yep, because 2 base plus 1 for charging, and those ones are hitting on 4s.
And the thing that you're going to want to do with them is have a librarian nearby that's going to give them the Unleash Rage.
Yep, Unleash Rage. It gives them an additional +1, so that would be
a +1
60,
attack.
Yeah. Yes, 60 attacks with chainswords in that situation, and 12 attacks with thunderhammers.
Wounding most things on 3s. Sometimes 4s, sometimes 2s.
Yep. So, for example, the Thunderhammer's going against something like an Imperial Knight, which is a juicy target for that. You're going to be wounding on 4s, or 3s rather, with the Thunderhammers. And then if you are charging something like Guardsmen or Plague Bearers or anything that's toughness 3, or did Plague Bearers go up to 4? I forget. Or Bloodletters, your generic demon model of any of your 4 flavors, you're going to be winning those on 2s. Just to kind of point out, I'm glad you brought up the librarian thing, Paul, but there's a lot of these Blood Angel units are very dependent on the support characters who are around them, and we haven't factored in the costs of all of those characters yet, but by itself, 350 points. So it makes a difference when you have to pay a supplementary 100 to 150 per extra character to get whatever other bonuses that you're trying to look for on here.
I apologize. Plague Bearers are toughness 4.
Okay, so you're wounding Plague Bearers on 3s. So you're hitting on 3s, wounding them on 3s.
And you may be paying for the extra characters, but don't ever underestimate just the natural ability that +1 to wound is such a huge boost to a combat unit right there.
Well, you have to pay. You pretty much have to get a character of some kind on any of the detachments.
Yeah, I think the most common one to buff Death Company in particular is Lamarty's. Lamarty's is fantastic in that he lets them re-roll their to-hit rolls and their charge distance rolls.
That is so strong.
Which
is
really good. He costs 129 points, so he's the exact same as a Captain Smash. So, and letting you re-roll those 1s and 2s can make a big difference when you really need to pack that in.
And the reroll the charge too, because this is very important. With Forlorn Fury, and this is actually what threw my strategy for a loop. What I've done in the past, especially when I was playing on Forlorn Furying, was throw the Death Company up there, string them out, and then allow Lamarty's to deep strike behind them.
Yeah, using Wings of Fire
and still get that thing. No, I did not want to spend the command points on Wings of Fire because I knew this was going to be. Watch the report, but I spent 10 combat command points in
no, well, I'm talking like before pre-FAQ.
No, yeah, pre-FAQ. I'm saying no. He just with a jump pack, just deep strike in a line basically back to catch the Death Company and get in there and do some stuff. But whatever, you can't even do that anymore. They got to come in there too.
The strategy has had to change quite a bit.
That is a good way to buff them up. I think Lamartie's is one of the bargain buys in the game right now.
I tend to agree. Some people cite his weakness as being just completely dependent on Death Company, just because all of his.
Well, he is also Death Company. He buffs himself.
Yeah, so he buffs himself, which is great. So he gives himself the reroll charge as well. Standard Jump Pack Chaplain lets everybody around him reroll a hit in combat, but doesn't hand out those reroll charge things. And I think that the reroll charge is where you're really getting your value, because you have to get that off now. One of the other benefits I think is worth mentioning for Forlorn Fury now, post FAQ, is the fact that because it's not a redeploy, the Ausspec scan and similar stratagems that people can use to, say, shoot at somebody who arrives from what wouldn't before have been tactical reserves, they're protected from Ausspec scan because they're not being redeployed.
Yeah, it's just a movement. It's just a jump up, free move. Well, not free move, but you get what I'm saying, free move.
Yeah. So if you have that first turn and you have that capability, it definitely has much more value than trying to redeploy that squad using Wings of Fire.
I think you can apply the pressure even if you aren't going first. Sometimes just applying that pressure in a mission with progressive objectives, you are absolutely forcing them to deal with that unit, which has value also. Now, not that they wouldn't probably attack that big fat unit anyway, but you are giving them no other option, and sometimes that's going to be good for you.
Agreed.
So again, Exhibit A on that. Next one I want to talk about is Bloodletters. Bloodletters, you can give a fatter unit. You can give them a 30-man unit. That's 29 regular Bloodletters and then the champion. I think you should definitely take the icon and the Instrument of Chaos. The instrument is the big thing here, is that it adds 1 to their advance or charge rolls. So when you do bring them down, you're able to make the charge on an 8 if you're going to be deep striking them. You want 20 or more models to give you the Murderous Tide. They have a rule that if you have 20 or more models in the unit, you add +1 to hit rolls. That means that they're hitting on 2s. The icon is if you roll a 1 when taking morale tests for the unit, any of the reality blinks and the demonic horde is bolstered. No models flee, and D6 slain bloodletters are instead added to the unit. It's 15 points. That is something that I consider a little bit optional, but because they're going to be what is essentially a dump and pump unit. I know that you traditionally only do that or mention that with ranged attacks, but these are something you're going to be deploying, throwing in, and trying to do all your damage in turn 1, but maybe not. Especially if you've got enough other things in your army to cause some distraction, you're going to be able to bring these down and start really grinding people out in their backfield. The unit of Bloodletters is 235 points for a 30-man unit with the icon and the instrument.
Now, if I remember correctly, having received some Bloodletter bombs in my time, there's bonuses that they get to their strength and to their attacks when they charge?
Yes.
Is that right?
When the unit makes a charge move or is charged or performs a heroic intervention for things like the Demon Prince we'll talk about in a second, or Heralds or whatever, until the end of that turn, you add 1 to the attacks and strength of all the melee armed or melee weapons for this unit.
And their demon weapons pretty much are all just power swords.
No, they are all power swords, but they have a bonus. Any attacks that wound roll of a 6+ made for this weapon have a damage characteristics of 2 instead of 1.
That's good. Okay.
So the leadership's 7. So again, you're gonna be rolling that morale dice, and every model you lose is gonna hurt. So maybe the icon. Maybe I've talked myself back into thinking the icon is mandatory.
Well, let's keep in mind that morale stratagem is still out there. So if it's super critical not to lose more, you could burn the 2 command points if you wanted to.
It's fair. So they have base 1 attack piece, but on the turn they charge or are charged, they go up to 2 attacks. So we're looking at 64 attacks from a fully staffed unit here.
That's a 30-man unit?
That's a 30-man unit, yeah.
Yep.
For the 230-something points.
And that's all with AP -3, potentially 2 damage when rolling 6s.
Yeah, and
Strength
5 for the most part. Now we're talking about the turn they charge or are charged. They've only got to make an 8-inch charge. That makes you, and there's a stratagem that lets them roll 3d6 charge.
Yeah,
the Blood Angels have one of those too, by the way. We should have covered that. But if you are wanting to hemorrhage command points on these strategies, they certainly allow you to.
Yeah, and it's worth noting too that for the Blood Angel stratagem, you have to be arriving from either Wings of Fire or from reinforcements in order to utilize that. You can't just put it on a jump pack unit. So there are certain limitations to when you can use it.
That's fair. So with what I'm talking about, the paying the command points to put these guys into reserves and then beaming them down from the warp onto the tabletop. You've got a unit, 30 guys, that has to make only an 8-inch charge which is then a lot easier to command point reroll that charge or burn the command points to get the longer charge.
Yeah.
Now you're also committing that unit to turn 2 now, though, to do that.
Yeah, that matters.
That does matter.
I think the benefit of this unit is just its ability to kill all kinds of enemies when it comes down. Because with those attacks, with that number of attacks, you can count on being able to kill a huge portion of chaff units.
Well, this
and
also
many of them.
This beats down knights.
Yeah, this will hurt knights. This will hurt anybody in power armor or better, or Terminator armor. Even your Custodes opponents and things like that. They have to think about, all of a sudden my 2+ armor save on these guys is going down to a 4-up or a 3-up if they've got the shield.
So with Bloodletters, the 36 attacks just from them, hitting on 2s because there's more than 20 in the unit, wounding on 5s with a -3 AP with damage 2 on some of those, that is a ton of converted wounds. I don't know any screening units that can stand up to this type of assault. If you're coming down turn 2 and you've already exhausted the screens, you're also being able to threaten heavily armored targets, take a few extra wounds off a knight, beat down a tank. I think we're going to see Leman Russes come back. I think tanks in general, I think, are going to come back or work their way back into the game once people adjust to the changes. That's my personal opinion. I love seeing tanks on the table, so maybe it's a little wishful thinking. But the Bloodletters basically kill anything.
Yeah, no, I feel like the Bloodletters have a more reliable, versatile turnaround on kill for a cheaper point expense.
And we talk about things to buff these guys, is that the Demon Prince that you can take, you take a Demon Prince of Khorne, and I know that everyone says, you just put Malefic Talons on there, and it's awesome. But if you take a Demonic Axe, got to pay the 10 points for the Demonic Axe, then you can convert that Demonic Axe to the Skull Reaver, which is a relic weapon that is also absolutely awesome at murdering knights. It is a melee weapon that attacks at +3 strength, -4 AP, D6 damage. Reroll all failed wound rolls with this weapon when targeting a Titanic unit. Each time you make a wound roll of a 6+ with this weapon, the target suffers D3 mortal wounds in addition to the normal damage.
Oh, that's beautiful. Directly tailored towards knights.
This is, this is on a Demon Prince, got 5 attacks. That means he's going to be swinging at strength 10. He's wounding knights on 3s, re-rolling to wound with a -4 AP. In case you're curious, that's all the AP.
Yeah, there is no save against that.
And then you're converting that to D6 damage. And then each 6... Now, the 6s it's not a given because of only 5 attacks, but you are re-rolling 1s, so you're hitting on 2s with this, re-rolling 1s, wounding on 3s, re-rolling the wounds.
And statistically, you're going to pull a 6 each time with the reroll.
Yeah, there's going to be some good turnover on that.
Yeah, that is a lot.
What's the point investment for the Prince? We talked about Lamarty's being 129 and him being a really good benefit to the Death Company units. What does the Demon Prince come out to? He's
actually strength 11 with the axe. I think I had briefly forgot that we can't go above 10. And his +1 attack on the turn that he charges for being Khorne would take him up to 6 attacks. So we might see a 6 or 2 out of that for an extra D3. He's 180 points, but he's got a lot going on for him. He's got an invulnerable save. And this is with wings. And this is what I want to talk about with, if you're going to be deep striking something in, and that's going to be the catch-all term we use, do you actually need the wings anymore? The wings are 24 points.
I wasn't sure that a Demon Prince came without wings.
You're exactly right. But this is what I'm challenging, because there's so many things that when we fire up our army building program that we just assume comes auto-clicked for good reason, because there's no reason. But now, do we live in a world where the wings are not mandatory? I think that the game is still won and lost in the movement phase. I think the wings are mandatory, but are they? Are they really when you're going to be bringing something down, typically out just outside of 9 inches? And that's another thing. You're going to be, whatever you do with the Bloodletters, I think you need to do with the Demon Prince also. So if you need to beam him in, then beam him in, because he's going to let all those Bloodletters reroll their ones.
Yeah, he's going to increase their attack ratio and their power significantly. But by that same token, he's going to make that 9-inch charge. But after that, he's going to have to go somewhere. And that's where I think the wings are still going to, that turn 3 when he needs to be somewhere, turn 4, that's when your wings are going to really pay off for you.
Yeah, people are going to start to run away from him after they see what he does to that knight.
Well, there's that, and the Bloodletters themselves are not as mobile once you drop them in. We're talking about, they're cheaper in points than Death Company. Their saves are inherently worse, though they do have invulnerable save, but it's a 5-up.
And no ability to mitigate. The Death Company have a 6+. Ignore injury, and these guys had nothing like that.
Yeah, and that doesn't come up as often as I wish it did, but it is still a factor and something that you have to consider. The other thing is the Bloodletters, since they can't go anywhere afterwards, really, they're just walking. And so if you want to reach out and touch something, having the Demon Prince with wings to be able to get around where you need them, I feel like it's worth the points. Now, if you're splitting hairs at the very end of your list building and you're like 20 points over 2,000, you're like, oh my gosh, but I need everything. Maybe the wings can go, maybe, but I still feel like it's worth the investment.
You're probably right about that, and it's important that we mentioned that since the Tide of Blood or whatever it's called for the Bloodletters that lets them hit on 2s, that means that only 1s miss, and then you're rerolling those 1s because the Demon Prince you have there. It's a force multiplier of how much AP3 damage you're putting out.
Yep.
I think that Bloodletters are now. I know that Bloodletter Bomb has been talked about a lot, but I think with the advent of better screens and people are going to be shifting more towards gun lines, I think there'll be an idea that you can forget about some of these units. I don't think so at all. I think that in some situations, these assault units are going to really make an impact on the games because, especially when you're talking about ITC missions and scoring, that the kill one, kill more, hold one, and hold more, you're going to have people that have a more than just 1 or 2 throwaway or long range units that they're having to spread out. And remember, some of the secondaries are things like recon, to where you're having to be in all different table quarters and stuff. People are the idea is that you have this ability to kind of spread out. And that is what every unit we're talking about right now loves, is to see a collection of lightly armored things hanging out somewhere that they could just show up and beat down.
Yeah, no, I think that you're right about that. And I feel like the Bloodletter Bomb, mostly because of their reliable ability to turn over hits and wounds and the inherent AP that they come with, make them a really good value. There's nothing that can say I'm going to be just fine.
That's good. And everything we're talking about here has the potential to beat down things like knights as well. These aren't just, and that's one of the cool things about the edition, is that everything can wound everything. These guys have ways to really increase their ability to do that. The Death Company have the wound on one better. The Bloodletters have the ability to get the AP and the extra damage.
And the increased strength on the charge makes some difference against most things.
Yeah, it's big. I do think it's, but I'm talking about even the things like the knights and tanks. Basically, whatever you're going to encounter, they have some ability to do damage to them, and it's not a little bit of damage; it's a lot. I wish I'd done the math before we started talking about this, but all those Bloodletters with what we talk about on the turn, they charge 63, 64 attacks that are all going to hit, and then they're needing 4s and 5s to wound. You're getting let's say they need 5s to wound knights. What is that? That's 60.
You're still about 20 wounds.
Yeah, you're looking at, and some of those being multi-damage.
Yep.
That's a lot. And then we'll talk about this. This is across the board. All these units that we're talking about have some way to fight again.
Yeah. That's true. Some of them have the ability to fight again.
Base initial attacks.
Yeah. Well, I want to talk about the full thing as to why we're talking about this stuff is good, because I think it's easy to write them off. People are going to think, oh, they can't kill this, they can't kill that. Well, they really can, but you need to have the engine for them if you plan on doing it. Like, there's a lot of units out there that are going to be, or I think there's going to be some amount of armies out there that are still relying on a Castellan, 128 wound model to do almost all their work. Well, as we just discussed, getting 20 wounds through and some of them being multi-damage is enough to really cause that thing to limp. Now, it will turn around, and they have ways to make it to where it's going to murder a unit, but then you can almost kind of casually kill this thing. You've invested what is sub 400 points into taking out this thing that's a 600 point model, 600 point model for your opponent.
And let's also keep in mind that since you have a turn or two of shooting at the Castellan, and most people are bringing things that have the potential in the shooting phase to do damage to a Castellan, which is one of the reasons I kind of feel like your tank aspirations are perhaps more wishful thinking than not, because if it can kill a knight, it can kill anything else, but it's probably going to be softened up by the time you hit it.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably fair. And just the threat of having these things to be able to deploy someplace else is going to be in the mind of your opponent, and in a tournament mission to where the progressive objectives are a big factor in determining what the overall winner is. If you just get 1 or 2 points ahead of your opponent, you might carry that lead out through the whole rest of the game, and being able to subtly influence your opponent's deployment and movement and whatever, because you've got this time bomb, this ticking time bomb, has some value in and of itself.
You're forcing your opponent to make decisions with Chris's unit in the beginning because of how fast it is, and with your turn 2 where you can potentially get to, you restrict options. And anytime you can force your opponent to play your game and restrict options, especially if you can get a lead, that's going to turn into points. It's going to put the advantage in the initiative to you, which is what you want no matter whether you go first or second.
That's a good point. So let's take a break. We'll come back, and I've actually got a segment with Mike Brandt where we talk largely about Kill Team. We're still very hot on that. I think that's going to be a game, well, we talk about it in this segment. And then we'll come back and talk about Berserkers. Then later,
sounds like a party.
Yeah, later in the show, I think I'm going to get a spot with our new sponsor for the month of October and hear what they're all about from their own words. I think it's going to be awesome. That's Jay from Discount Games Inc. We talked about him on the last show. We'll have him on, I think, this show as well, if I'm able to get it in before the published time. Anyway, we'll come back here in just a few minutes. We'll come back in a couple seconds with Mike, and then we'll come back with us talking about Berserkers.
Kill.
You are tuned into Forge the Narrative.
Hey everybody, welcome to a very special segment of Forge the Narrative. I'm joined tonight by Mike Brandt.
Hey, it's nice to be here with you again, Paul.
Mike, man, thanks for joining me.
I appreciate you inviting me.
It's
been a long time since Nova. It feels like we've missed each other for a while.
That's exactly right. And we haven't had a proper Nova recap. And we probably won't have time during this show, but by all accounts, another very successful convention, full-blown weekend of hobby immersion.
It was good. We kind of blew the doors off the place. We had 2,000 people last year, over 3,000 this year. And we're running out of room in the hotel, but we have our 10th anniversary there next year, so maybe I'll finally convince you to miss some part of Dragon Con.
Dude, I think I've already got the okay with the wife and everything else to fly up at least for a day.
Oh, I am stoked to hear that. We'll talk more about it as we get close. But yeah, it was great. We raised close to $100,000 for charity. Everybody had a great time.
That is amazing, man. Congratulations.
Thank you. That's the whole point it exists. So people having fun and raising money for good causes.
Well, we'll talk about the website and where they can find it. But we actually, after your convention, we talked a lot about the Kill Team organized play pack. I shouldn't even say organized play, the competitive play pack, another tier above organized play.
Well, it's funny that you mention it because those missions are very much, in my opinion, I'm one of the lead testers for Kill Team. And so I've been involved with it from, back when it was a nascent idea and, getting to see it, behind closed doors and all that. and have been excited about sharing it with people for a long time. And of course, as a tester, you have to just kind of like sit on your hands and be real quiet about it. So it's been hard, to have like the same 2 or 3 guys in my local region of the test group, which is, worldwide at this point, that I can play with, and no one else I can talk to about it. So when it came out, it was really exciting. And the organized play pack for Kill Team, you can see influences from some of the well-known tournament formats, even in 40k in the design. And it's brilliant and simple and cool, and very much, in my opinion, just my opinion, the most fun and most built for the game way to play. So there's lots of interesting, one-off missions in the core rulebook. But if you want to play a fun, engaging, phenomenally well-balanced, and very fluffy way to play Kill Team, the organized play pack is very much that. It's not a super complicated tournament-only kind of mission pack. And it's, in many ways, if you think about it as like an engagement process with the testers and with organizers and with Games Workshop, with a lot of lessons learned from the whole design process and the way missions have gone over the past several years. It's very much a reflection of like the way Games Workshop likes games, and also input from the community. And it's a really cool packet to play with. So if you haven't tried it yet, even in just pickup games, it's very much not an intimidating, 3 layers deep tournament format. It's just a bunch of really cool missions.
We've been really excited about Kill Team, just the core game itself, and people, they write in, they ask, hey, where do I start? And we started posting Kill Team list on our Facebook page. We talk about it a lot on the show, and you came in with a comment, say, hey, you're doing it wrong. And I know, we know it, you're being tongue in cheek. You're poking fun. I get it. I'm cool with that. But then you said something else. You said the command roster army list is the way to play. So tell me, what do you mean by that? So what did you actually mean by that? And then what is, after people have they've gotten the course, they've gotten the rule book, they've gotten their 100 points worth of models from whatever they want. How do they evolve it past that? What's the next step?
So the game, it's an interesting question. And of course, the doing it wrong was, you've all heard the memes and things, doing it wrong. So that was indeed tongue-in-cheek. But it was also a little bit true. And what I mean by that is that other than in like the very most basic pickup learning how to play version of Kill Team, in most games, including when you just walk into a store to play with someone, it's very much intended that you bring a command roster. And a command roster it's described throughout the book. Unfortunately, it's probably not clear enough how commonly it is supposed to be used. But for pickup games and in match play and tournament play, and casual play and narrative play, it is up to 20 models. And those models can be any number of points. They have to be geared, so they can't just be like a gunner and TBD on the weapons. And if they're going to be a specialist, that has to be listed on the command roster as well. And what you do is, after seeing the mission in your opponent's command roster, you build your kill team of 100 points for the game.
You carve the 100 points out of the up to 20 models that you have.
Exactly.
Already listed.
It's a vital element of making the game balanced. And a good example to articulate that in brief is, if you look at like guardsmen are very cheap, and you can have a ton of special weapons in a guard kill team. In fact, players who play that the first time, where they go up against someone who has a bunch of guard and scion plasma, go, holy cow, how is that balanced?
Well, that is the linear path too. Once you start, if you're just playing book missions and you're just using what's on the pages themselves without looking too deep into it, that's the linear path. You eventually go to, how many models can I get with melt-in plasma guns? And
exactly. And the reason that that's actually surprisingly balanced in terms of using the command roster is that as soon as you put 8 or 10 of one special weapon on a command roster that's capped at 20 models, all of a sudden you're really out of flexibility. And so if you go up against someone who says, well, fine, I've built 12 or 15 poxwalkers with my 5 plague marines on my command roster. You want to bring plasma? I'm going to overwhelm you with a bunch of little guys that pretty much don't care about the fact that you have high AP. Or I'm going to bring, I have my 1,000 Suns list and you're spamming plasma against me, but I'm going to bring my 10 Zangors that I built onto the list instead. And now your plasma, really all it is the same as a bolt gun to me, and I'm going to overwhelm your dudes. And there's lots of examples of that, but the more elite teams like Space Marines and 1,000 Suns, Plague Marines, etc., actually end up with a lot more flexibility because of the command roster, because they can build a far greater number of permutations into a 20 model limited roster. And so reactive list building, because when you see your opponent's guard command roster and he's got 10 plasma weapons in there, you kind of know what he's going to do. There's very much intended to be a balancing factor of hordes versus elite baked into the way command rosters work, as well as kind of a fluffy part of the game. Like heart and soul, what is Kill Team? Kill Team is not Necromunda. Necromunda is a bunch of, half-starved gangers scrapping, in the
cobbled
bowels.
Together potato guns and...
Yeah. They're not pros, but Kill Team's very much intended to be a bunch of elite bad, from all over the 41st millennium going on super dangerous special operations missions. They're the two opposing forces in that, climactic scene from The Rock. They're SOCOM, and so if you were sent to go clear out a bunch of orcs, you would hardly show up with your melt-a-gun. You'd show up with your flamers. And so Kill Team presents with its command roster function very much an ability to actually do what would make sense for a special operations force with its own, these are the best of the best, the creme de la creme. The basic guardsman in Kill Team is a guy who's a highly trained bat from across the guard, pulled and drawn just like in Saving Private Ryan to go on an extremely difficult mission behind enemy lines, and certainly has access to a fair bit of an armory to take advantage of before they go into battle. And so the command roster is really powerful for balancing, but it's also much fluffier than, well, my Kill Team of just 4 melt-a-guns is up against a bunch of orcs. I don't know why, but yeah, that's what I got.
I was actually looking through the book right before this, and that narrative element to it is baked into the army list as well. It's built into everything. There's a place to write the name of your guy and stuff. I mean, and there's a name generator. Even if you don't feel particularly creative, you can still start to kind of build these little scenes with just what's here in the book.
Yeah, and that was a big... I won't speak for Games Workshop. This is always a bit my opinion, but just from my experience as, a tester and also after test and talking to them, there's very much the intent with the game, if you play it the way that it's laid out in the book, that it's very hard to not be on the same page as many different opponents. And the example I'll give is that I host gaming every Monday night at my house in DC. If you're a listener in the DC area, please reach out. I'm always happy to add people to the group. And a wide variety of folks come to those game nights, but some of them are extremely casual hobby first players, and some of them are extremely competitive players. And for 40k nights, the attendance is smaller, in part because the games take longer, but in part because there are certain player types that feel like they can't really compete and play the way they want to. For Kill Team, we're getting occasionally over 20 and more players at a guy's house on a Monday night. And the reason is that everybody's on the same page, because the game is actually really well balanced, and it's balanced around the way that is thematic to play. And so you have people coming and feeling like they can play the Kill Team they want to play, and it still does just fine, especially with those missions, against Kill Teams brought by players who tend to go, well, what's the most optimal thing I can do? And that was a really big effort that we put in during playtesting and everything else, that the game wouldn't just be balanced, which can kind of be a bad word to some people, but would be balanced around very naturally thematic ways to play. And so if you really dig deep into the rules and play the game right, I'll say, as opposed to doing it wrong, it's remarkable how good it can be.
Well, let's go through what right is one more time, if you don't mind. So,
yeah,
at least the scope of, if you're going to be doing this, the next level past just getting cobbling together 100 points worth of models and rolling some dice with a buddy, is the command roster, which you basically list out whatever it is you want. This is what your available pool is for when you saddle up to play a game. You both come with this. You both look across the table. Do you look at the mission first? Do you get to look at the mission before you pick your stuff? I mean,
you do. In general, the missions, even the book, talk about using, a Battleforge command roster. But in short, the way you kind of roughly would do it is you bring your command roster to the table, and then you can look at each other's command rosters. That's kind of open. You generate a mission, you build your kill team, and then you go to town. And I want to say there are some missions that are different where, you might build your kill team first before you see it or similar, but generally speaking, you bring your command roster to the table, and then your kill team gets built after you've seen, quote, the table, which is your mission.
You look at your opponent, the mission, and then you get to say, okay, I'm going to do this, and then there's some reveal.
Exactly. So your commander's told you you're going to go, capture an objective, and there's rumors of orcs in the area. You go, okay, well, what kill team is best suited to tackling that mission? And those are the guys that get sent behind enemy lines to do it. The rest of you guys might be engaged on the main war front, right? And let yourself forge that narrative to see where it takes you.
That's a real similar mechanic that we've seen in even the gangs of Kimura and Necromunda, where your whole gang and your whole just didn't show up. They were off, either waylaid before the game started to go to do something else, catapults or delayed in the air and you're on the ground. I mean, it's whatever. It's all very thematic.
Yeah, I mean, that's spot on. And I like it personally just because I like the idea of, it's always struck me as weird when like a tactical marine is like, I'm deploying to fight an orc horde. Let me bring this melt-a-gun as opposed to grabbing the trusty flamer. But yeah, I mean, that's the heart and soul of it.
Well, I mean, that's pretty cool. But that's part of the 40K experience is how to plan against what you're going to fight, what you think you're going to fight through that string of games in a tournament. I enjoy that part of it. I get it. I also get what you're saying on this other side to where it's a whole nother level of interaction. It's also, I mean, it's a point of failure. It's a way to, because you could have a mix of things on your roster, which I would imagine could potentially obfuscate what your real plan is. And so the other kill team could make the bad choice or,
yep.
A less optimal choice, probably the best way.
You nailed it. And what's one of the things I really love about command rosters as we play them more and more, even at my own house, is they provide the opportunity for narrative, because 20 models is really not that many models in any book. And you don't have to use all 20 on your roster. If you have a kill team of 6 guys that's all you want to run, that's okay. That can be your command roster. You're not doing it wrong if you never change your kill team, but you can. And it creates both competitive player friendly options to like lay traps with the way your command roster is laid out, and also narrative friendly options where you've actually got a truly reflective, ragtag band of bad to choose from as suits you for your dirty dozen per game.
I like that. Do you mind if we talk a little bit about the strategy around the game itself?
Sure.
The pre-phases to the game. So like the scouting move and the laying of the traps and that kind of stuff.
Yes.
In the starting phase.
It's interesting. You'll find that competitive play missions don't use the scouting phase, which is sort of almost a little disappointing because it's an interesting little bait and switch element. It can be a bit binary in that some of the scouting choices like directly hard counter some of the other scouting choices, but it's part and parcel of that whole, narrative feel, right? Where, if you've got a SOCOM team, engaging on a target, the early phases are not, we're shooting already. There's an element to getting the lay of the land. And I think that's what the scouting phase is trying to reflect.
Do you see something about like this phase working its way into competitive play and is this something like we manipulate missions for tournaments? We write different missions that are in the books. Do you see this phase being something that could be alterable by individual tournament organizers? I mean, I know that's pretty much an open question. I guess anything is able to be manipulated for your own event, but
yeah. So I do think you could use it, and you could also use it as a way to create and to innovate. We've certainly, I would hope that, if you look at the organized missions that were put out by Games Workshop, they're both extremely fluffy, and extremely balanced. And so they create a lot of room for, organizer creativity while also maintaining sort of the design intent of the balance side of the game. But if you wanted to mess around with almost anything, I think it's very easy to, and the game's resilient enough because of the command roster system. It's hard to screw up the balance while doing so. Because, if you go into a tournament, it's not like, well, shoot, I've only got my one kill team. You can build your roster or even just take your standard roster. And basically, if the mission says, this criteria is unique, we've made it up and this is how it works, we'll build your kill team to respond to that. And so it's much more flexible or forgiving of those creative elements being added than I think, your 40K game is. And it probably bears saying they're not the same game. They share things like datasheet profiles and whatnot to a degree, but from my perspective, they're really not meant to be like 40K and mini 40K.
I don't think so. It's a completely different experience.
Yeah, it's 2 games set in the 40K universe, which you might as well say that, Dawn of War is video 40K. It's not. It's just a totally different game. It just happens to be in the 40K universe.
I'm not kidding. This is not just radio talk about saying it's on fire. I mean, I've got people that have not touched their 40K models in years that are now avid kill team players.
Yep, it's crazy. I've had people come that I haven't seen since playing totally different games to play 40K, kill team at my house. I mean, people who don't play are showing up to play. And, part of it too is we occasionally will, I'll bring my models in the car, cause it's like 10 models. The cool thing about the organized play missions is they're built around the kill team core box. So that the terrain is fixed and is made specifically and exclusively from the core box. So those missions literally even lay out the terrain for you in a balanced way.
That was going to be my next question do you think that level of terrain, which is a lot, by the way, it's such a great value box. for what you get. But do you think it's enough? I mean,
I have personal worries that it doesn't have enough LOS blockage because everything has windows. On the other hand, I had that worry going into Nova because it was presented as a competitive event. We had like 160 different players playing in Kill Team pods at Nova. And we had one person out of, I think, 110 filled out the survey afterward who said the terrain was anything other than good or very good out of a scale of up to very good. So I think it is enough. There's a part of me from 40k that is worried about LOS blockage.
Yeah, that guy got shot up live.
The same guy made comments about plasma or something like that. So, but when you have 1 out of 100 saying bad and 99 saying good or very good, I think it is enough. Which is not what
the terrain,
I'll be honest.
The rules are somewhat forgiving for, they're very, open to getting cover. I think you got to be near it. Even foot being blocked by a rock is enough. I mean, it's,
yes. And range is the thing. It's very possible to set yourself up to where, in the early goings it's -2, and in the later goings you're much more flexible with combat and other things. But it's also a player base that's still learning the game. So
fair, yeah.
For folks like me and Tony who are testers who have been playing it for close to a year or more, or however long it's been, we don't struggle as much with some of the things you hear about, charging versus shooting.
Well, charging, that's a big change too. I mean, you could potentially, you get yourself out there in the open. I mean, you move with a failed charge.
Yep. It's a very useful part of the game.
But that's part of what I'm saying, that it's a completely different play experience. You're using models that look cool. I mean, oh man, let me just do a quick aside. And this is a bit of a tangent I'll go off, but I've been doing a lot of painting recently, and I feel like I've been getting a little bit better. I went to go and try to paint a Reaper model where the details aren't as pronounced. I mean, you want to remind yourself, you want to humble yourself with what your painting is. Paint a non-GW model. But whatever, you're still playing with models that are awesome. You get to pick anything you want off the shelf, basically, and play with it. But it's a completely different play experience.
It is, and I just painted an Adeptus Mechanicus Kill Team, which is what I'm using as AdMech. And it's one of the best looking armies, quote, that I've got now. And it took me like a few hours in total to paint it. So that's maybe one of the cool things about Kill Team as well is, like Blood Bowl, it's much more accessible to really put your back into a fully painted force that's really nice looking. And so I feel like the level of hobby we're going to see in Kill Team events is going to be, sort of proportional to the level of really balanced play we're going to see. And that's kind of the magical thing we've always wanted, right?
A game. You think that balance, that core is built off of this filling out your command roster?
The command roster is very much a part of that. I can only share my opinion. I can't tell you about what the design team intended or told us they intended during the test process, but I can tell you that my opinion is that the command roster is a vital element to the game being truly balanced. And if you play without it, you're not only playing the missions largely not the way they were written, but I think you're missing out on an opportunity to add both flavor and balance to your games, especially as you're learning. If you play mostly with just one fixed kill team against one fixed kill team, you're going to go off on a trajectory that doesn't match the way that Games Workshop's tournament format plays. And you're also going to learn a totally different meta than the meta that was balanced around, because I can't tell you what we play tested or why we play tested it, but I can tell you that we certainly used command rosters the way that they're written in the book as part of testing. And so, our feedback, whatever was or wasn't taken, was based upon, playing the game as you see it.
It's a fair point. And it's probably a little premature, but what's your feeling on how commanders are going to influence the game?
I can't talk about commanders yet. It's cool. The commanders expansion is really neat. It opens up a lot of interesting new ways to play the game, but it's very elegant and careful about not doing so in a way that, 2 months after the game released or whatever it is, radically changes Kill Team from what people are learning. So at the risk of being coy, there's not much more to say other than it's very cool. It's elegant. It doesn't,
it's very encouraging. I appreciate you sharing that. And I won't try to pull anything out, but that's just kind of, I think that's part of the concerns that I hear is like, oh my goodness, this is supposed to be this level of game, and then when everyone's just going to be playing Hero Hammer again. But it's not.
That will not be the case. It will not even remotely be like that. It will be really cool, and people will like it. But I don't think you'll see a meaningful impact on the experience of your game.
That's good. It's just another cool model to paint.
Yep, it just expands the game.
I took it, as an opportunity to paint up some Death Guard Marines, like Plague Marines. Mm-hmm. Now, I mean, I've got an old 3rd edition Plague Marine army, and I was really wanting an excuse to competitively put Plague Marine bodies on the table again. And those new plastic models are just begging to be used.
They are, and I've done the same. I'll be honest. I have a Death Guard kill team as well now. I have like 8 kill teams, and it's so cool to me because it's so accessible. Like, I have less models in my 8 kill teams than I have in one of my 40k armies combined.
But you could spend a weekend just doing that project. Okay, I may not be able to get my 40k army painted in a weekend. That means I've got to spend multiple weeks or even months getting ready to even just put the army on the table. You could get a kill team ready in the weekend, especially if you're doing Tyranids. You're doing Tyranid warriors or whatever. You got to paint. You got to paint 5 models.
It's super accessible that way. And the other thing too, I'll hark back to command rosters a bit, but I have a 20 model command roster for my AdMech, but I only have 11 models. And so someone would say, well, why do I have to paint 20 models to start playing Kill Team? And the answer is you don't. Not only do you not have to fill 20 into the roster, but, I've got 5 variety of a guy with a radium carbine. One of them's a comm specialist, one of them's this and that, one of them's this and that. And as long as I don't plan to use all 5 in one game, I really only need 1 or 2 models to be able to start playing with a full command roster with all of those options baked into it. And so it's really neat, in my opinion, because I've only got 10 or 11 AdMech models, but I've got a full 20 model command roster. And so it digs deeper into that. If you think outside the box for a second and just kind of embrace it, it's not telling you, Primaris player, you have to buy 20 Primaris Marines. It's saying you have the flexibility to equip your 6 or 7 Primaris Marines to the mission, which is, frankly, nothing could be fluffier.
Yeah. And I think if you're playing like an Imperial army, you go get a box of Skitarii Rangers and a box of Scions, and you have almost infinite combinations of things to put together to make some unique looking miniatures.
Bingo. I bought a Skitarii box and I bought a Infiltrator Rustarker box, and I'm done with an AdMech kill team. And how cool is that?
Yeah. And I like the speed. Okay, so this is probably another good question for how long do your games typically take to play out?
If we're playing over the 7th beer of the evening, like maybe 60 minutes BSing. And then so I just recently used clocks to a degree for the first time at Nova. And so I've been messing with clocks, trying, be able to speak about them and my opinion on them authoritatively instead of just as an idiot with an opinion.
Conceptually, yeah.
Yeah. And I did that when people started first talking about clocks. My first reaction was, that's bad for the game. And someone, Reese in particular, we were chatting and he was like, well, how much have you played with clocks? And I was like, a couple times. And he said, well, how do you know? Maybe when you get used to them. So it was a really good recommendation. And I spent a bunch of time playing with clocks, but in Kill Team, so in 40k, I find clocks add a level of stress to the game, but they sure make sure it finishes. Whereas in Kill Team, we play with 30 minute split 2 ways, and we finish really relaxed, casual games with like 12 minutes between us left on the clock. And that is my favorite thing about the accessibility of the game is I'll bring my kill team to the office and meet a friend in DC for a lunch break, and we'll play like a 20-minute engaging cool game while, having a sandwich.
If we ever beat it to death on the show, like the board is different. You're not playing on a 4x4, you're not playing on a 4x6 or whatever table. You're playing on a very confined's probably better, and on a framed space.
Yep, it's 30 inches by 22. It fits on most tabletops. And the basic mission is 4 random to 5 instead of 5 random to 6. And the organized play missions, which again are really good fluffy missions too, they are 4 turns, period. So before you know it, you're done. And it kind of has that, it's straddle. I find Shadespire to be too quick and too tight and restrictive, so it forces a very specific way to play each team. I find Kill Team to be the perfect middle ground between Shadespire speed and 40k or Sigmar speed, and that you can play it easily in under an hour, but it still feels like you had a really deep game experience.
That's interesting. I think those are in very different categories to me, but it's that I can definitely see that perspective.
Yeah,
I like it. But these are my questions from a newbie, as it were, to someone who's had a lot more roll of the dice with Kill Team as to where do you see the list evolution going? How long do the games normally take for when you're playing with this from start to finish? And it still all seems right in tolerance. I mean, pretty spectacular.
Yeah. Since I had some tiny little hand in helping test it and everything, I would hesitate to praise it too heavily, but I love it. And 40k is my first and forever passion. But for a Monday night or for a pickup game, or even I almost want to say even for tournament play, most of the time, I think Kill Team is better built for all of those things because of the time it takes to play and because of the balance inherent in its design. If I'm going to a giant GT like LVO or Nova, I'll probably still play the 40k GT RTT first and foremost in Kill Team if I can, because of the spectacle and the social and the, 500 players. But if you ask me, would I rather go to a 6-round half-day Kill Team RTT or a 3-round all-day 40k RTT, I'd pick Kill Team every time.
Nice. Okay, so what is some list building advice for the next few minutes that we have for people that are getting into this, wanting to become more competitive? What do you think people should stock in their command roster across a couple of different factions? What do you see standard, or what should be standard?
It's a really good question. I think the most important thing to building a roster is build your specialists you're sure you're going to use first. So I'll give you a real world example on, how I built like my Skitarii roster. So the first thing I did is I said, okay, well, who are my leaders likely to be? The infiltrators and the print. So leaders are command point generators. They really don't have, they have a tactic that is somewhat useful in combat, but they're really not combat models. They don't have any combat advantages. They don't get extra attacks. They don't hit harder. And so you want to make sure your roster has a couple of leader options on it that are cheap, basic leaders. Orcs have the most comical version, which is the Gretchen leader, which is literally the Gretchen that sits behind a wall on an objective.
I got a buddy who's got his red gobbo leading the revolution.
Yep, that's exactly right. You can have a from the front leader, but thematically speaking, we're playing a game of imagination in the first place when you have space, fungus, green guys. If you want the guy leading from the front to be a punchy guy, make him a combat specialist. Don't make him a leader specialist. That's not really what the leader specialism is for. So, my Skitarii list has like a ranger with a galvanic rifle, a ranger alpha with a galvanic rifle. That's one leader. I have another leader who has a melee weapon because I just think it's cool, even though he's not very good at melee. And then I have a variety of weapon specialists with different specializations that help with their weapons, like sniper, plasma guys. They reroll 1 so they can supercharge safely. For combat, I can take an infiltrator princeps, only 1. I can take a rustocker princeps, only 1. So I'm going to put 1 of each in my team with the combat specialist and 1 of each with the zealot specialist, so that if I go up against someone who's just as shooty as me and I want to turn the tables on them, I can bring, a combat princeps and a zealot princeps, and I can bring, a couple of melee weapon alpha Skitarii guys, and all of a sudden, I can run into their face and beat them up really well. Or, if I don't go against that, those guys can stay on the sidelines because I got 4 or 5, radium carbine vanguard. And the radium carbine is a really great weapon in Kill Team because it does multi-damage on 6 to wound, and multi-damage is king for taking guys out of action. And then you have a couple varieties and variations of your different plasma.
It almost seems too swift and terrible, but that's one of the things that we counsel on too, is if you have access to good, cheap, multi-damage weapons, you should make sure you have them just in case.
Yeah, it's remarkable how different it is from 40k, where that's not necessarily the best way to go. It can be, but it reinforces how different the games are, that it's so important to be able to roll multiple injury rolls. But, the example there is that the first thing I think about is not, how many plasma guns and how many transuranic arquebusiers should I have. It's who are my specialists that I have to have on the roster for flexibility. And once that's done, once those 4 or 6 or 8 models are done, then you target your specialists, not specialists, but really your gunners, right? So how many plasma guns do I want to have ideally, if I want to max them, or how many flamers, or how many, heavy weapons, etc. Get those guys on there. And then the rest you should just have dudes, so that if you have a game where you really don't think you're going to win the fight and you want to score all your objective points, you can get as many guys as possible. For you Marine players, that means, even though I know you love your Primaris, try to have a few scouts so that you can just have some somewhat affordable guys to sit on objectives.
Just objective holders.
Yeah, while your Primaris Marines go beat everybody up. Long and short, think about model count. So don't shy away from having a handful of just basic dudes. And make sure you start with the specialists you think you may commonly use. Then get your special weapons in, and then fill out with the common dudes. And that's a really good place to start.
Do you think there are any standout, specialist traits that people need to focus more on? Maybe, where do you think the best way to spread it around is?
So, Zealot and combat are vital because extra attacks is a really big deal, especially for teams that have access to multi-damage melee weapons, like we just talked about. Plasma snipers are phenomenal for the obvious reasons. Demolitions template weapons are amazing because it's so easy to be obscured, and they get +1 to wound if they're demolitions against obscured targets, and they hit automatically with their flame weapons. So you're targeting targets that are normally harder to hit with weapons that hit them automatically and now wound them more easily. And then again, I would say avoid the urge to have your whole team be heavily equipped, expensive guys. The best Deathwatch teams are going to be like 6 to 7 if they can, not 5 20-point models. Even though frag cannons seem cool.
They do seem very cool.
They are. They hurt. But they're often only 1 damage roll for injury, and it's really hard if you only have 4 or 5 guys to score objectives in the better missions. Have those hard hitters, the obvious plays, but make sure you don't fall for that classic blunder of taking nothing but, expensive
actual eggs in one basket.
Exactly.
Okay.
Couldn't have said it better myself. In fact, I didn't.
Well, there you go, man. Well, Mike, thanks a lot for coming on and giving us this insight. I mean, this is one of I think this game is going to have legs. Yeah, I mean, I shouldn't say leg. It's staying power, endurance. We're going to be still playing this game a year from now, 2 years from now.
I think that's true. And I can tell I can't tell you much, but I can tell you, in my opinion, Games Workshop isn't going to quit support and kill team for years.
That's perfect. That's all we need to hear, man. Well, Mike, have a great rest of your night, and hopefully I can have you on again pretty soon.
All right. Thanks for everything, Paul.
We'll see you.
Take care.
FTN is brought to you by Bell of Lost Souls. Check out www.bols.org for the best daily hobby articles on the web.
We are back. Still got Chris and JP here.
I'm front.
Blood for the blood god.
This is Berserkers. There are multiple ways to run them, multiple flavors of Berserkers. Alpha Legion was incredibly popular. I think one of the things we're going to talk about is how did the change to forward operatives affect those guys? If it's still worth it to run them as forward operatives, Alpha Legion, or now should we just go full on World Eaters?
Yeah, and that matters because I think they come with 2 significantly different builds. If you're going to go Alpha Legion, previously you could run a 20-man blob of Berserkers, and I mean that's just a lot of killing right there for only 350 points. Because you're going to obviously take the Icon of Wrath with that to let you reroll charges. There's all these units have had mechanics to do that. I think that's incredibly important for a combat unit. You got to guarantee your charge. But previously, you could use that to infiltrate them forward and almost guarantee that first turn charge if you got that turn.
Well, you'd start the game essentially 3 inches away from your opponent, and pretty crazy.
Exactly. Because when you look at a 20-man unit and arming them with the most common being chain axes and chain swords, you're looking, and this is a unit that can fight twice, but just in that first set that it's fighting, you're looking at 61 attacks, with 41 of them being at strength 6, -1 AP. That's a lot of damage coming out from a unit that then gets to fight again, and if you really want to get froggy, pop your stratagem, spend a couple more command points, and just do even more damage.
They fight again as part of their base profile. They don't have to burn any command points to do that. They just get to fight again.
You're at 122 attacks without burning a command point, without using a stratagem, just by that unit for 350 points. But with the change now, unfortunately, having only that scout move, I think really hurts and hinders that build. If you deploy them forward on your line, you utilize your 9-inch move. You then get to move forward another 6 inches. You're only 15 inches into no man's land. You're still pulling, unless your opponent was put it right up on that front line, you're not necessarily going to even be in charge range of anything that your opponent has in their army.
You're 9 inches away from if they started on most deployments. You're 9 inches away, even if they started on the line.
If they started all the way forward to you, and unfortunately, if you're taking a 20-man unit of Alpha Legion Berserkers, you're kind of telegraphing your punch. Most opponents are going to pull back a little bit, which might have some play. Maybe that's what you're trying to force them to do. But I think one of the better builds now is back to that old Zerg Rush and the Rhino Rush. If you look at a 8-man unit, and you're going to rock an 8-man unit for their 146 points, that 8-man unit with 146 points, their Rhino, which is only 72 points. So right now we're at my horrible math of 18 points. 218 points for a unit that you can then put your force multipliers, your Exalted Champion and your Dark Apostle, which respectively let you reroll hits in the fight phase and reroll wounds in the fight phase.
That reroll wounds is obnoxious.
huge on a 6-inch aura for a 70-point character. That 70-point character, that 76-point Dark Apostle, that's letting you reroll. You already have 25 attacks, getting to do it twice. You have 50 attacks now in that 8-man unit. You're rerolling hits, you're rerolling wounds, you're protected in a Rhino, and now you have a delivery mechanism to actually get there, because unlike the Death Company, you don't have jump packs, and unlike the Bloodletters, you're not deep striking them. But now you bring that unit forward, it can be powerful. And with the new beta rules, to be able to give yourself cover even if you're put forward, that Rhino just turned into a mini Land Raider. 2+ armor save is huge.
So you think that's a reliable delivery mechanism for him?
I do. I do, to the point where I'm trying to actually kind of half convince you and argue on it for our Adepticon team.
I definitely agree that the forward operative stratagem makes the Rhino Rush option much more palatable.
I think that the Berserkers are pretty much the same points as the Death Company. Is that what we've determined?
If I took a 20-man unit, it would be 350 points, which I think is relative to the 15-man unit with jump packs.
But that's without, they don't get Thunderhammers.
It's 2 points more expensive.
Yeah, they don't get Thunderhammers. Now, there are more bodies and there's more attacks and they get to fight twice. And I think that really matters, because we were talking about the Exalted Champion, which, a lot of this stuff, I don't want to talk about it in a vacuum. I think that talking about what you should be taking in addition to make these things work, it makes a difference to whether or not they're viable or not, because it's the overall point investment. So it matters. But you should be taking, at the very least, that guy that lets them reroll the wounds.
And when you take that, so if you want to extrapolate it out a little bit, you take your Dark Apostle and your Exalted Champion, you take 2 units of 8 Berserkers and 2 Rhinos, and you take your icons for your rerolling your charges, chain swords and chain axes, and that's only 582 points. And if you wanted to talk before about, well, is that viable with Alpha Legion or World Leaders, if you throw an additional unit on there to take your own World Leaders battalion, if you're looking for command points, 3 Rhinos, 3 sets of Berserkers as troop choices, an Exalted Champion, and a Dark Apostle, that's only 800 points. There's a battalion that's going to go run up forward.
You could do that battalion cheaper too, Cultist or whatever.
Oh, if you didn't want that 3rd unit on there. But at that point, you now have 24 Berserkers, which are just going to tear through any screen, any knight, anything they get in their way. And if they all move forward and pop smoke, you're -1 to hit them if you're going first. And if you don't go first, you use the command points to give them instant cover to make those Rhinos a 2+ armor save. You're actually a lot more survivable than we were in previous pre-FAQ.
That's interesting. And they can pack that punch, but just the sheer weight of dice, just a huge volume of attacks. We're talking about stuff. This is not just chaff clearers. This is kill anything stuff. This is kill. They have the number of attacks. That everything that we talked about has the number of attacks to kill multiple units at the same time. You can spread them. You can comfortably spread them out and also still feel confident that you will be able to wipe several 5-man units, a 10-man unit and a 5-man unit, potentially another 15-man unit. Like if any of these units get the drop on one or the other, then they're pretty much all getting picked up.
I like how we're talking about them as one big unit too, just because the ability to have people either heroically intervene, or if you have 2 units like this that you're trying to charge both at the same time, you have to choose somebody who's going to take some damage first before delivering. So maxing out the size of these units, I think, is maximizing your ability to deliver that hurt.
And I'll agree with that, but as long as you maximize the size for the delivery method you have, because a combat unit that can't get there is just wasted points. You have to have that ability to deliver them.
Well, with the things we're talking about also have a way to do that, to mitigate what they're going to lose on the way in, such as the Forlorn Fury, or even Wings of Fire for the Death Company, or the Deep Strike, or the Rhinos for the Berserkers. I mean, I think Berserkers are the ones that lose out the most in this situation. So they have probably been hit the hardest as far as an assault element goes.
The change to Alpha Legion definitely decreased their effectiveness on the battlefield. You have to look for a new delivery system.
You don't think we'll see Charybdis or anything come back?
Well, if you can, I mean, turn 2 does have some value. I mean, it's a lot of point committed to it. But when they come out, just like you said, they're going to kill whatever they hit. Whether it's a big single target or a 20-man unit, they're just going to wipe them.
If you're taking a patrol of this, which I don't know, man. I don't know if this is a different discussion altogether, but I think that the benefit of taking a battalion, you should pretty much try to take a battalion at all times.
unless you're taking battalions and your other detachments so that you'll maintain the command points, I absolutely agree with that. If you're just trying to fit one, maybe two, I would go with world leaders in a patrol, because then you also gain the benefit of that extra attack, and that plus the chain swords with the chain axes, and even that small unit that you're going to take is going to really be multiplied. But unless you're taking 2 additional battalions, I mean, this is a very command point thirsty world. You got to have those. You got to have those CPs to burn.
And this topic is in direct response to where I think that Army List design is going to go with the beta rules and the different changes that we've seen or that we've got in our erratas right now. I think that we'll start to see more screens, more people with MSU type builds, both in line with the missions and trying to protect some of their bigger units, thinking that people aren't going to be able to get past their stuff. But that goes in line with like how you use these units too. Like all ABC, always be charging.
Get up there and punch somebody.
And declare the charges. Because you can fight twice, but you can only fight things in the fight phase that you charged if you were the charger.
Yeah, there's almost no reason not to declare everything within that 12-inch. If you're really afraid of Overwatch, at least with the Berserkers, the trick is to use that Rhino to move in first and soak up some of that Overwatch for you.
That's a good point. Because, I mean, who cares if they fire 15 bolt guns or whatever at a Rhino? They're not killing it. They're probably not going to kill it. Heck, if they could be firing several multi-guns at a Rhino on Overwatch, they're probably not killing it.
I think that adds some values to the Rhino Rush Berserkers as well, because neither of these other options we've talked about come with a built-in Overwatch sponge.
It's tactical positioning. If you take them as a world leader, you can make them OPSEC because they're troop. That adds value, especially if you're playing the mission. Being able to wipe a unit is great. Being able to wipe a unit, consolidate, and steal an objective is even better.
Yeah, let's say you charge in with 8 to 10 guys, and you're going to kill a lot of them, even if you're charging a 20-man unit. You might even have 3 or 4 extra models and claim that objective.
And that Rhino being able to choke off fire lanes, soak up Overwatch, block you so that you force your opponents to go around it, especially with the change to fly. They can't just jump over a Rhino to get to your unit. They have to move around it or try to make that longer charge. It becomes a valuable tool if you use it correctly. Yeah,
especially on battlefields with very low terrain. If there isn't a lot of line of sight blocking terrain, I can imagine, like with a Bloodletter Bomb or with Forlorn Fury and Death Company, maybe you move behind a wall before you make your charge, or you deep strike behind a wall to avoid off-spec scan or intercept thing here. I'm looking at you, Inari. But if you have a low terrain environment where there's nowhere to hide, or if you just simply have to put them in a spot out in the open to get the target you're looking to reach, having a Rhino to soak up those hits does not suck.
Rhinos are underappreciated.
They are. I mean, once upon a time, it was a very solid tactic, and we kind of went away from it. And I think we've kind of kept that group thought that Rhinos, they suck. But if you look at it as now that we've adapted to wounds, now that they have a toughness value, we can get them up to a 2+ save turn 1 now with this new rule.
And can Chaos Rhinos still take combi meltas?
They can. They have the combi bolters, and then
they can take combi meltas. Yeah,
they can take a combi melta, plasma, flamer, or bolter if they want to. In addition, and the Havoc launcher, so they can actually be a decent mobile fire base as well.
Just speaking generally of Rhinos, I still feel like there may be a little bit too many points, even with the combi bolter, combi whatever potential that they have. Or storm bolters if you're a space marine, a non-trader.
They don't do quite enough in some of these other lists. Like I was playing with them in a Space Wolf build very recently, just to basically shuffle around Grey Hunters and get to objectives and give some amount of protection. And I just didn't feel like they did enough. I felt better about the drop pod, which everyone universally does not like competitively. than I did the Rhino in that list.
The drop pod took a hit with no reserves on turn 1, a further hit than it was already taking. I'll argue for the Rhino in that 72 points for 10 wounds at toughness 7, 3+ armor save, a smoke launcher to get you -1 if you can't get forward to the charge, self-repairing on a 6, so on a 16% chance you're going to heal a wound. It's 72. I don't feel it's too expensive for something where you're tailored to deliver berserkers. And a lot of other lists, I would not argue to take a Rhino just to transport a troop, but trying to get this assault element forward, I think it's their best option.
Well, you're guaranteeing if you start 10 berserkers on the table, you're not going to get to the line with 10 berserkers.
Correct.
And so it's essentially it's an insurance policy on them. And then when you get them there, you want them to be able to do what you need them to do. I mean, 3 berserkers fighting with all those attacks fighting twice is a lot. But it's still not going to give you the sheer gutting power that if you were able to get there with the whole unit. It's a magnitude stronger when you have the whole unit there.
9 to 10, and then it also helps you for suck along your Dark Apostle and your Exalted Champion to really get those reroll hits, reroll wounds. It just takes that unit, and like you said, it's insurance, but it multiplies its efficiency. And that's what you should always be looking for, ways to multiply efficiency.
Yeah, that's fair. So I guess the should have led off with this, but is Assault dead? Are we just going to go the way of the gun line and the screens? And I don't think so. I think this stuff is going to become even more valuable as we see List evolve as the perception of Assault being dead starts to kind of filter in, and as people start getting focused in on trying how they're going to win the missions, it's going to leave themselves exposed to some of these really powerful units.
Now, we've been talking a lot about the pluses for these, and I agree that there's definitely going to be some underestimation for the effectiveness that these units can still have. I don't think that they're as good as they used to be, and I'm thinking about what are the things I don't want to see as someone playing these units.
You don't want to see the one on who goes first.
I saw that a lot.
Well, and I think it bears mentioning, that you want another reason to build these squads big is it reduces the number of drops you've got.
That's a good point.
You want that +1. You want to be able to take that initiative. I think going first has not become less important in 40k.
And missions do help. Sometimes you want to go second, but I'll definitely agree with that. You want to be able to deliver your punch when you want to, whether that's turn 2 with your bloodletters or turn 1 with those Death Company coming across. You definitely want to. But I think one thing, I don't think Assault's dead, but I think it's not going to maximize as much of your list as it might have in the past. I think you're going to have to, it's going to be a portion of it, but the greater portion I think is still going to be in shooting.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to stick to my guns here. I think that the way we'll see lists move will be towards that mentality. Like, I have to take all this stuff. And it's really going to set people wide open to be taken advantage of by the units we're talking about right now.
Which will be fun.
Well, yeah. I mean, of course I could be wrong. And inevitably, I'll line up against someone in round 1 that's just perfectly designed to kill my counter elements of whatever assault unit that is. But I think that we'll see that. We'll see people being really in a like they'll be keyed up to do all this stuff that we're talking about that's hyper efficient, or objectively better than it was pre-fac. But this other stuff, as they move towards that, they move further away from being having a good defense against one of these super hyper focused on assault units. And what's the best way of doing it? I'm thinking the bloodletters are the best right now.
I'm sticking with the Zerkers. I'm really loving the idea of the Rhino Rush and the tactical flexibility, but while also applying combat power.
Yeah, let me go. Bloodletters plus the Demon Prince. Demon Prince
is always. Let's not lie. Even in my list, I'm still going to take a Demon Prince.
All right, fair.
My own personal biases aside, if that's possible in this instance, I would never side with the traders in this choice. That's all right. I'm just going to be honest about it. I think that the mobility that comes with the Death Company, whether it's the Forlorn Fury or the ability to redeploy if they're in a dicey position via Wings of Fire, and yes, it's tougher now with 2 command points to spend on it, but at least it's not 3 or 4.
It's still worth it.
I feel like the mobility and just the option to be able to take them from one place to another, even if it's just to deny a kill. I think that the Death Company have some value. I would really like to see them drop a little bit in points, though.
So, newsflash, Chris sided with Blood Angels.
I can't.
In other news, water wet.
Can't blame him. I really enjoy moving the Death Company around the table. And it is what the Blood Angels have that the other units don't have is the ability to be somewhere else. You could conceivably come down, do something, and then go somewhere else and do it again.
And I agree with your earlier statement, and I've been preaching this for years, but the movement phase is what wins games.
Yeah, I like it. Well, guys, I think that's what I want to talk about on this discussion. I don't know if we've righted any wrongs or solved any problems, but I think it was cool to kind of talk it out.
Oh, absolutely.
Hopefully somebody people come here for. Yeah.
Yeah. Put those models on the table, and don't be afraid to play a combat unit. They still have use.
Yeah. I believe, this is just what I beat the drum about. If you're going to have an assault unit, then if you're going to play an assault-based army, you've got to have as many points as possible in assault to make it work. But I think with some a good application of 500 points or less in your army, it might be enough to throw people for a loop and really turn some what might be close games into blowouts in your favor. But we'll see how that goes.
Oh, yeah, I completely agree.
Well, other than that, what's everybody else got going on? So we got some kill teams getting built.
That's right. I got the last of my kill team order. Too bad Ricky's not here to make fun of, I don't know, boonies or whatever. But I got the last of the kill team stuff, so I've been reading through the rule book, and I've started playing with a couple of lists.
Ironically, I'm actually building 4 rhinos right now. Not for world eaters, though. I'm now that I've kind of half convinced myself to change my paint scheme on them, because they were going to be just for my regular Marine army. But I'm also building a lot of electro priests, working on my AdMech.
Hashtag save the rhinos.
Chris, make sure you listen to that segment with Mike. We actually specifically cover some kill team command roster building techniques.
Yeah, I'm interested in hearing how that goes down. It's something that I'm really interested in doing and really interested in being able to be creative about. Because with models that I have right now and models that I have painted, like I can put down Orc kill teams, Tempestus Scion kill teams, of course Marine kill teams, some Grey Knight kill teams, like just from knickknacks I've picked up over the years, nothing that I could ever field in 40k. I love an excuse to use these.
Yeah, agreed. I'm building, not too uncoincidentally, a unit of 30 bloodletters. They're kind of fun to put together. The kit, this is the first time I built the new plastic bloodletters. And it's neat that all the variation comes from pretty much the head and the arms. All the bodies are the same. Like there's not even any numbered parts on the sprue. You glue the 2 legs together, you glue the torso on it, and then you start to customize.
I'll tell you that is not the case for all the AdMech Rangers that I've been building. If you don't put them together exactly, trust me, you're in for a bad day.
I'm going to try the box tutorial. Whatever. I'm just going to paint it like it has on the box. It's kind of funny on the back of the box. It tells you how to paint the basic sword, but the picture right above it is the complex kind of bright lava type power weapon sword. So I don't know which one I'm going to go with, but I'm going to go with the Mephiston Red, Caribou Crimson Wash, and then build up the highlights from there, just like it says in the box. And I got high hopes. I think it's going to be a good looking model, good looking kit when I'm done.
And effective.
Yeah. We'll see. I'm really looking forward to swinging that Demon Prince axe around.
Oof. Maybe my Grey Knights will be more efficient against you when you do.
Well, you're not going to play Knights all the time. You're not going to see Knights everywhere. But even if you don't, he's still swinging a neg 4 AP weapon.
And it's still good against like Shadow Swords and all that.
At strength 11.
And let's be honest, though you're not going to see him everywhere, you still are going to run into him in a tournament for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
They're definitely not dead.
I don't know what my demon list is ultimately going to be. I don't think I've committed to any one god enough. So we'll see what this mismatch of stuff comes together. We got that preview of the Fiend, the Slaanesh.
Yeah, I like the new Fiend. I think that actually that model really needed an update, and it came out really well.
And we'll see if that translates any attention for demons.
Well, I mean, it's positive. For a while, people were thinking that Slaanesh was dead, and then I'm glad that they're still getting some love and some stuff put forward for him.
Yeah. Well, guys, thanks for the talk. Hang in. We're going to have a word from our sponsor here in just a moment. We'll be back next week with, we got more Kill Team. We might, this has been a fairly tame October. I'm hoping it ramps up.
Give me the orcs.
As the next couple of weeks go by. We'll see how that is, but I'm looking forward to it.
You and me both.
You guys have a good rest of y'all's night.
Yeah, man. See ya.
Good night.
You're listening to Forge the Narrative.
Hey everybody, welcome to a sponsor spotlight segment on Forge the Narrative. My name is Paul Murphy, your host. I'm joined tonight by Jay Larson.
Hello, Paul.
Jay, man, thanks for joining me.
You betcha. Excited to be on.
You're owner of Discount Games Inc., our sponsor for the month of October.
I am, yes.
And you also have a podcast experience. So I thought, why waste this opportunity? Let's get you on to talk about it.
Cool. Yeah, so I've been doing a podcast called Chain Attack for about 7 years. It's been focused on, it was initially, we did battle reports for War Machine and Hordes. We've been doing fewer battle reports recently, but we still do a weekly episode.
And I thought a topic of interest is I believe that like chess clocks and stuff are real popular in War Machine tournaments. We are now on the 40k side of things thinking about integrating them more. So I thought that'd be a great topic to talk about. But first I want to talk about your website and your store. You actually, in addition to the website, Discount Games Inc., you actually have a physical brick and mortar store as well.
Yeah, so I have a brick and mortar store called Gameopolis, and that's actually what we operate the website out of. I started the business with, this was around 12 years ago. I took $500 and bought some inventory and just reinvested the profits, selling stuff through eBay, and it eventually grew into the business that I have now.
That's pretty cool, just grinding it out.
Yeah.
So you don't just have miniature gaming stuff, you have all kind of stuff now available.
Yeah, so miniature gaming is our most popular products that we sell, but we have Games Workshop, Malifaux, Infinity, War Machine and Hordes, et cetera, et cetera. But, we also have role-playing games, dice, basically anything that you would expect a well-stocked game store to have, we carry.
And I know I've been cruising looking at your site. I'm trying to track down some Nolzur's Beholders.
Yeah, that WizKid product line has been really popular.
It's great. I mean, I use it for tabletop. I have a son, my youngest son. We actually play with the miniatures. It's something because they're inexpensive. We can use them and battle his battles, or whatever. And they're awesome. Yeah,
I mean, it's a really well done product line that you sell a bunch of them because it's nice that there's also a little bit of a D&D renaissance going on right now, and so they're kind of the perfect miniature for that game.
Yeah, pretty neat. Well, I was obviously checking out your site, and I know I'm looking for some stuff as well.
Awesome.
Oh man. Well, so Jay, again, thanks again for coming on. Can we talk about this tournament thing with clocks and timing of turns, and
sure.
You can maybe explain about how that originated on your side, and then how it eventually became adopted by the players.
Sure. So starting off, there was an experience I had years ago that kind of illustrates the problem that you have if you don't have some sort of timing mechanism in a tournament. So I was playing in a tournament and I went second. It was actually my brother. He went first. I did my first turn. He did his second turn. And before he finished his second turn, the round time was up, and I never got a chance to basically do anything the whole game. And he ended up winning the tournament because he'd killed more stuff because, he'd had 2 turns where I had
He had 2 turns, right. So he had a kill point advantage
right.
Is what we'd call it. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So, that's the sort of circumstance that can arise if there isn't some sort of timing mechanism going on. And with War Machine, Private Your Press puts out a tournament packet that gives some guidelines on running events, and they have what they kind of consider the baseline of stuff, and then they have different variants that you can use. And for a long time, the standard was that people would use a kitchen timer to do a time turn. So your turn would
wind it up to 10, and then it went done,
right.
Ding, or whatever you were.
Yep. Then your turn would be done. And during the game, you would have one 5-minute extension that you could use during the game. And so, that worked, and it was definitely better than having nothing. And that was the standard for a really long time. And part of the reason why that was because there was a concern with Privateer Press that there wasn't going to be enough chess clocks for people to be able to do events.
A constraint. If this became what was mandatory, then there would be an issue with how many there were, if it was fair across the board, that kind of thing. Okay.
Yeah. So the interesting thing that happened is that a lot of the local communities would play with this chess clock variant, and they would do different things like have tournaments where the prize support was reduced with the intention of raising money for the community to buy chess clocks, because the consensus among the players ended up being that they enjoyed the chess clocks a lot more than the time turns, kind of overwhelmingly so. And so over time, a lot of the communities ended up building up the chess clocks so that they could play with. And Privateer Press ended up switching recently to where now chess clocks are the standard and time turns is the variant.
Interesting. Okay.
So the way that it works with Privateer Press is basically with War Machine is each player has an hour of time, and when you're going, your chess clock is going, and if at any point your time runs out, then you lose the game. So it's one of your loss conditions potentially with running out on your chess clock.
So what was the time frame in which people started trying this? Was there skepticism in the beginning? Yeah, how did it evolve?
I think that there's always going to be at least a vocal minority that is kind of resistant to change. Sure. But I think that overall it wasn't too hard. When people actually tried using it, they felt like it was a pretty good solution. And so is
there a particular brand that people get? Is there one you think that's better? Like if people are wanting to grab something to experiment for their own 40k games at home?
Not really. I personally prefer using the digital chess clocks over the mechanical ones, but it's also getting to the point where the digital chess clocks, if you look on Amazon or some of the various places, are really not that much money. I mean, you can find them for around, say, $25 for one. Which, if you add up that in a big tournament, that can
sure,
be
you multiply by 200 tables, and then you're
right. Yeah. But if it's one person, like compared to the amount of money that we spend on this hobby, it's pretty small.
No, you're dead on. I guess it just wanted to. I think that we fight a mental perception issue, and that's kind of where everyone's struggling now. Is that no one wants people like change. No one likes to be changed.
Right. Yeah.
And so I think that finding ways to overcome these hurdles may get us to a better place competitively. And I'm one of those people too. It's like I have full belief that I'm gonna always play fast and I don't need to worry about it. But I'm not necessarily the type of player who may need one, but I bet there's going to be situations where I wish there was one on the table. And
and one of the things that I experienced as someone who's trying to get people into the game or as a game store owner is that chess clocks actually ended up being, like, of the potential timing mechanisms that you could use, chess clocks ended up being more friendly to people who are slower or that are newer players. They don't feel the pressure of a time turn, and they may eventually clock out, but they'll have had an hour of playtime, and maybe they don't get in as many turns as they normally would in a normal game, but in general it ends up being a better experience than some of the other alternatives.
Oh, I got you. I get what you're saying. I think that's maybe something we all don't know or agree with yet, is that it may eventually lead to a better a better experience. But I have faith in it. I do. I think that this might be something that that especially if the tournaments that want to legitimize their final rounds or the top 6-8 tables or whatever, we may see these become mainstays. And I thought that hearing you talk about how your community dealt with it might be something that we could take as a little bit of incentive, a little bit of comfort as to how it may work for us.
Yeah, I guess the other side of the coin is that gaming in a lot of ways is kind of an experiment, and the community generally makes their voices heard, and if the the Games Workshop community, if they end up feeling like they've tried this and it doesn't work for them, it's not that big of a deal to go back to what you were doing before. So
well, I guess that's fair. Well, Jay, where can people find your podcast if they're interested in hearing about this type of stuff?
So our podcast website is chain-attack.com, or if you go on iTunes and search for Chain Attack, then you'll find our podcast as well.
And if people want to check out your online store, it's discountgamesinc.com. You have a whole manner of miniature games, board games, role-playing stuff. Yeah,
and real quick, let me mention with Games Workshop stuff in particular, Games Workshop has some pricing guidelines that I adhere to strictly. And part of that is the stuff that I have listed on my website is at 15% off. And that's the max that I can sell Games Workshop product for. But if you shoot me an email at j@discountgamesinc.com, I can give you some information on how you can potentially get a rebate on your orders and get even more savings.
Awesome, man. Well, Jay, thanks for coming on. I look forward to talking to you again soon in the future.
Awesome. Thanks a lot.
Have a good night.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening.